Hello, and welcome to a quick, or maybe not so quick, we'll see, live stream. I am Kendra Little from Redgate's Database DevOps Advocate team, and I wanted to show a workflow that I've been working on. So what I'm going to show is a way that if you are a SQL Source Control user, you might be interested in changing things to be able to customize your deployment scripts. And the particular example that I am going to work with is an example database that uses a partition table. I have set up here, let's see if zooming works. Yes, zooming does appear to work as planned in the live stream setup. I'm using a demo database called a sliding window because what I want to really simulate is a sliding window partition scheme. Now, one of the little pain points that can happen if you're working with a sliding window partition scheme is that you might have a case where against your production database, and I've got a fake production database set up. My fake production database lives on demo UK02. Thanks to the glories of SQL prompt, it is coloring everything red because I did that old thing where I right-clicked and said, actually, I didn't right-click there. I right-clicked on the server and I said, hey, SQL prompt, please set the tab color of this to red production because I don't want to accidentally do stuff there. Now, it's a fake production instance, but what we're simulating here is what if we have a production process that regularly changes the partitioning on the table in some way. And in this case, I am splitting a range. I'm adding a new boundary point to the production database. You know, with sliding window, I might also merge boundary points. I might do a lot of things with it. But in this case, I'm just splitting the range there. And when we make a deployment to this table, we want to ignore whatever boundary points are there in production, right? We want to be able to deploy changes to the table, but we want to be able to not have to worry about those boundary points. And we might also, sometimes when we're doing something like creating a new table, we might want to add some data to it. There might be things that are a little bit tricky to define in source control for, just using SQL Source Control, because SQL Source Control is a state-based deployment tool that will capture the schema of everything. And, I do have some flexibility in SQL Source Control. I have the ability to use things like pre and post scripts to say, hey, I want to, run some commands, but pre and post scripts run on every deployment. And I might want to have things that are only run once per deployment that change data or do things that are just time consuming to put into pre and post scripts or just don't fit well there. Now, previously in SQL Source Control, you may have looked at this migrations tab. And what happened is we had a feature here for doing migrations in SQL Source Control, but it turns out it just didn't fit well for most of our users. So now it says, hey, if you want to use migrations, you can now configure this with SQL Change Automation, or of course you can use those pre and post scripts. So what I'm going to show you today is this workflow where you can hook up SQL Change Automation to be able to easily and quickly make customizations to the scripts from SQL Source Control. So if you still want to work in your SQL Source Control, but you want to be able to customize the scripts, then this workflow might be useful to you. Now, in this scenario, people who like this workflow, they are most likely to work in the following way, where they are going to bundle a set of changes together. They're going to say, over the course of this day, or this week, or these 2 days, whatever the frequency is at which you want to deploy, we're going to generate a bunch of changes in SQL Source Control. So I'm just going to go here on this partition table, and let's go ahead and say that we want to add a column to this table, right? So I'm going to just go into design here. And I'm going to add, you can see the beauty of my naming on this. I'm going to add col5, which is an integer column. And I'm just going to click save. I'm just showing that you can do this with the designer. You could do this in T-SQL as well if you want. But now I have column 5 on this table. And maybe let's do this one with T-SQL. Let's say I want to create an index on dbo.partitioned table. Isn't it named beautifully? going to go ahead and here in SQL prompt, I'm going to ask it to refresh its suggestions. So I'm going to create an index on partition table, and I want to go ahead and do it on create index. I didn't give it a name. Create index in C partitioned table. I had a little red underline there. It's like, Kendra, you didn't quite do that right. Maybe you should think about your indexes a little more. You haven't been thinking about indexes enough lately. Maybe I should be thinking about indexes more. So let's go ahead and create this index on call 1, and maybe we'll include call 3. You know, with such great column names, it's hard to go wrong, right? So I'm going to create this index on my partition table and close that out. This is my dev server, so its tab color is green because I set that up too. Now in SQL Source Control, let's move our dangerous production window over there. Now in SQL Source Control, when I go into the commit tab, it'll check out my database and look for recent changes. And one of the nice things I like about SQL Source Control is that it very politely displays to me a little recap of the code. Now, remember when I added that non-clustered index, I didn't say anything about creating it on the partition scheme. I don't have to create that non-clustered index on the partition scheme. I could create that non-clustered index on any file group I want and say create a non-partitioned index on this partition table. But if I don't specify anything, it'll default to creating it on the partition scheme of the table. So it defaults, and this is a nice chance for me to be like, oh, okay, it's actually, this is creating this non-clustered index as partitioned, as defined by the partition function and scheme. So I have a chance to realize that. If that's not what I want to do, I can change that before I commit. But in this case, that is what I want to do. And it also has added in that other column. So I want to go ahead and do both of these changes. So we're adding a column and an index to dbo.partitioned table. So I'm going to go ahead and commit that. And I'm going to go ahead and push it. I am pushing, in this case, directly to master. I don't have any fancy pull request workflow set up in there. And I'm going to tell SQL Source Control to go ahead and push it to master. If you like to work with pull requests, and I love pull requests, totally can with this workflow. I just have kept this demo pretty simple and have just set up basically a continuous integration pipeline. So if I push to master, it's going to go ahead and run a build against the folder I've pushed to. Now, the way I have my repo set up is I have 2 folders set up. And you can name these folders whatever you want. I named one construct, and I named one deliver. And the idea here is that as I work with SQL Source Control throughout the day or whatever the interval is between deployments, when my team works on this, we push things to this construct folder. That's where SQL Source Control lives. When we go and get ready to deploy, when we're ready to push things to a QA environment and then to upper environments after that, at that point, we're going to use SQL Change Automation to generate migration scripts, and they'll be stored in this deliver folder. So I don't have to worry about that until it's time to actually get ready for a deployment, get a deployment ready, and then push it to whatever sequence of environments I want to test in that will eventually go to production, because I want to test the exact same script against all of those environments. And if I need to use a change management system, I want to be able to say, this is the exact script that we've tested. And this is the exact script that's going to production. So right now our build is running against this construct folder. You'll notice that in my pipelines here, I'm using just Azure DevOps services as an example. I have a build pipeline for the construct. Again, you can name it whatever you want. You could name it SQL Source Control build if you wanted. And then I have one for my delivery pipeline there. So my build succeeded just now, and adding a column and index was there. So in the real world, I might iterate on this. I might push more changes. Other people might push more changes. Multiple things might happen before I'm ready to deploy. When I am ready to deploy, whoever is generating the deployment scripts, maybe it's me, maybe it's someone else on my team, maybe it's a DBA, whoever makes sense to generate the deployment scripts, that person is going to make sure that they have the latest code from SQL Source Control from whatever branch you're deploying from, right? So depending on how you want to manage your branches in SQL Source Control, you can do whatever you want. I am just using the master branch, right? So I've just made sure I have the latest from master. And then I'm going to go into SQL Change Automation. The way that I have SQL Change Automation set up, notice that it says generate migrations here using the SQL Change Automation plugin in Management Studio. And it says that my source here is construct. If I click on that, it says you are using SQL Source Control as the source of your development scripts, right? If you're using SQL Change Automation by itself, you would be using a database to do that or a clone to do that. But in this case, I'm saying I want to actually do my development in SQL Source Control, and then I'm just going to cut my deployment scripts in SQL Change Automation. So I've said my source is a SQL Source Control project, and I've given it the path to that here. And that path is the path to that construct folder. So it looks at SQL Source Control here. When I say refresh, it's looking at my local folder from SQL Source Control, and it says, hey, I see that you've done some changes in here. Now, if I had multiple changes here, I would be able to select them. Notice that there's a checkbox here. Let's say 4 different things had been committed to SQL Source Control, but I actually am like, it turns out we actually have to deploy one of these really fast and the rest can wait. You can check off one, bring that one in, make the others wait if you want. That's totally fine. In fact, that's what a lot of people have requested, so this is a way to do that. So if you have multiple changes in here, and they will be by table, in this case, I made 2 changes to the same table, so they're on here. I could import both, and I could delete one from my migration script. I have to have a way to do that, but I need to make sure that I did eventually deploy that other change too. All right, so going to go ahead and in this case, just trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to show you before import. Let's go ahead and generate that migration script. I think I've shown you everything I wanted to show you. So I can look at my migration. I can edit it, right? Let's say I wanted to generate this with online equals on. And by the way, we do have a flag now that if you want to default to say always descript, always script things with online equals on. There are options that you can set now in SQL Source Control and SQL Change Automation to say always use online equals on scripting. For SQL Change Automation, these are kept in the SQL Change Automation SQL proj file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to where I have actually stored my .SQL proj file. Let's make this a little bigger. So see how there's my sliding window. This is my get folder. You know, this is in my delivery. It's my SQL Change Automation project sliding window. Here's my .SQL proj file. Let's take a look at that in VS Code. Because there is some important options in here. So options in here. One of the options that I have set is I set the option of sync option ignore data spaces to false. In other words, do not ignore data spaces. You need to have this option set in order for SQL Change Automation to see partition functions and partition schemes. So if you're setting this up with partition tables, you want to make sure that you do set sync option ignore data spaces to false in the SQL Change Automation.SQL proj file so it will pick those up. And let's see about our online indexes here. We don't have a sample in here yet. I need to actually circle back with the team on this one because we should go ahead and let me actually make sure I'm searching the whole project file, right? That would help online. We need to make sure that we have because these green things are just comments and they are examples. And I'm like, did you search up now? Because there is an option you can set in here to say script with online equals on. And I am suspicious that it is my searching that is to blame here, but it does say no results. Am I doing case sensitive? No, no results. So I'll ask for that one. All right. So, but if you don't like the way it's scripted, the beauty of SQL Change Automation is I can just say with online equals with online equals on, right? I can do Control K, Control Y, at which point SQL prompt is like, you didn't do that right. I think I have to say option online equals on. Option. Is that it? Create, you know what you guys are seeing with is that I actually haven't worked with indexes in a while. Well, I'm kind of heartbroken at myself. All right, we're going to the create index documentation. Create index SQL Server. We're going for seriously? Online? I have just online issues today with online equals on, indeed. As always, I need to see the examples at the very, very bottom of the this isn't even one of the hard ones, right? With, got the with right. There's no option. There's drop existing equals on. How have I done this wrong? I do find a way. Oh, I know what I've done. I've put it in the wrong place. So, isn't life funny? Yes! So because this specifies the partition scheme there, the with clause goes before the on clause, but after the include clause. I used to know this. I mean, documentation's useful, right? I am quite sure that there's a way that SQL prompt would have helped me with this. I could create a snippet for it, certainly. But so there's create non. Yeah, check that out. It actually does give me tips there. So these are some of the built-in snippets there. And let's see. Notice that it points out that you've got these optional with options that come before the on file group option. So that could help clue me in terms of I knew online was one of the with options. Yeah. Anyway, so if I was a better SQL prompt user, I would have figured that out faster. But here we go. I make my way through somehow. So I have modified the script. And note that it is going to be creating the non-clustered index on the partition scheme. And we are adding the column. If I wanted to add something that modified data, I could go ahead and do that too. If I did something like add code that changed the schema though, like if I was like, oh, I want to add column 6 and I just added it here, I would be responsible for making sure that change also got back into SQL Source Control. And in order to help do that, you can add steps to your pipeline, which do something like perform a deployment from the source control code, perform a deployment from the deploy code, compare the results, and make sure they match, right? So there's ways you can automate ensuring that if drift happens, that you take care of that. Now, I have noticed that my tab is red. So I have actually accidentally connected this to the demo UK 02 server. When I'm doing development, I just shouldn't have demo UK 02 around. In fact, I only had it around to show that script. Now I haven't run this script. It's just connected to that, but that's why this is red over there. Or actually it's this tab right here that's red here. So we'll close that guy, but it hasn't run against that yet. Let's go ahead and run a verify now. We will validate that that's not on demo 02. All right, so my verify succeeds. Make sure that my code is all right here. I'm going to go ahead and go to the version control tab. And let's go ahead and commit this code. So I'm going to go ahead and commit the code. Let's see. So I'm adding a column and an index to partitioned table.sql. Go ahead and commit that and push that up there. This is a new feature. Version control tab here is new. So this is in preview. And if you'd like to check it out, we would love your feedback on that. All right. So before I deploy, in reality, you're going to have more separation between these things. You're not going to be looking at them in Management Studio alone. But generally, there are going to be some people who develop and deploy on the same thing. But just to show you, in production right now, partition table, it has columns 2, 3, 4. It has, let's see, we've got the beautifully named indexes, IX test and IX test 2. And we are going to look at deploying these changes to them. So in my pipelines here, notice that, let's look at my pipelines here. My deliver pipeline ran just now. When I push that change, I have deliver set up to run a build right away. So it has run a build for adding a column and an index to the partition table. And that was successful. And then over here on my releases, release 4 is in progress. And the first step that release 4 does is to create a release artifact. The release artifact is going to, and that's now succeeded. The release artifact is going to say, hey, when I deploy these changes, what am I going to do? So if I go here and I look at my releases, notice that this is waiting right now. So I have a gate set up here. I have 2 stages set up, and I just I let it create the release artifact to figure out, hey, what am I going to deploy? And then I have a little step in here so that an improver can go look at the release artifact and make sure, does this look right, before actually clicking deploy. So we're doing a very simple continuous delivery pipeline here. If you're like me, you constantly get confused between the words continuous delivery and continuous deployment because they both start with continuous and the letter D. So I always am like, the one that has an approval step. Sorry, my memory isn't that great. So you can have this artifact written anywhere you want. You can have it written to a share so that you don't have to have access to the production server to review it, but I have mine just going to a folder on demo UK02. And what we can look at in that artifact is we can take a look at, I think I can just zoom here and see that we haven't done a deployment since we actually added column 4. So we're actually going to add column 4 and column 5, and then we're going to create this non-clustered index here. And if we look at the script here, we can actually look at the exact script that's going to be deployed. So in reality, we might be pushing this to a QA environment first, right? And generating the script there. And we would want to be making sure that we're running the same script. Now, the thing I want you to notice is, remember how I did split that partition against production? It is creating the index on the partition scheme, right? And I added in that with online equals on, which I so cleverly remembered the syntax of. And we're adding column 5. Sorry, I misspoke. We're adding column 5. I just misread the changes. So, actually, did I misread the changes, or is that, so column 4 is there, and column 5 is being added, and the non-clustered index is being added. And this also might just be that I am not good at reading color-coded things, but I am good at reading SQL scripts. So we can tell from the SQL script exactly what is happening here. I'm much better at reading that. Let's make sure I read all of them, right? So we have here, it has sections. Here is one incremental migration that it is executing. Okay, this one has already, that's a raise error command. All right, let's actually start at the pre-deployment script. So if we have a pre-deployment script, it will be here, right? In this case, it's going to create the database if it doesn't exist. So if you're doing something like deploying to a new environment, it can still work. Then we go into the incremental migrations. And in this case, we are beginning incremental migration 004, right? That's this guy right here. I suppose it's not gendered. That's this thing right here. And this is that migration right there. So we are actually adding column 5. We're creating the non-clustered index. That's what we're doing. This is what I get for doing a live stream at 5 p.m. on Friday before a holiday weekend. So when we actually, let's go ahead and take a look here. I want to go back to my other VM there. I actually just want to show our work. So this is demo UK02, production instance. That is not the right database. That's a different database. We're going to look at partition table, and sure enough, it does have column 4. It does not have column 5, right? Only has 2 indexes. And now we're going to go back into Azure DevOps, and I'm going to go ahead and approve this deployment. So I clicked on this. I'm going to go ahead and say approve. There we go. The deployment is approved, and it is running that right now. And what's happening right now is there is an Azure DevOps agent that is installed on the Demo UK 02 instance that is connecting to the database and deploying from the release artifact to it. Now, I have had cases where when I watch the screen, it actually finishes and then doesn't tell me that it's done. So our agent job has succeeded now. If we want to look in here at the logs of this, we can actually see in here, I think this is actually quite nice, the stuff that was run. So we can actually see that this is the script number that is run, and any comments that are on the scripts are in here as well. So that's quite nice. And now if I go to, Management Studio and refresh, how do I click? Now I can see that column 5 is there. And when I click on my indexes and refresh, now I have yet another badly named. All of my these this is just a terrible shame that naming this is not a good index name. I mean, arguably, no, I think it's just as bad as the others. Don't name things like I do. But this does give you quite a lot of flexibility when it comes to deploying changes to partition tables. In terms of allowing drift to occur against the production database and letting you really tweak the options on how you want to deploy changes to those partitioned tables. So this can work when you have, and I think it can work really, really well when you are working in SQL Source Control and you want to have really good control over your deployment scripts. You want to be able to customize them and make sure that the code that you're testing against QA is the exact same code that's being tested against production, or even just the code that you're reviewing is going to be the same code that's run against production. Using SQL Change Automation with a source set of a SQL Source Control project gives you a workflow that lets you work in SQL Source Control if that's your preference, and then fully customize your deployments. Thanks for joining me for this live stream. I am Kendra Little from Redgate's Database DevOps team. I'll see you again for another live stream soon. Bye, folks.